morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, participants to this 69th International Executive Council meeting of the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage. My name is Chandra Madramootoo, and I'm President Honoraire of ICID, and it's a pleasure for me to welcome all of you here to this beautiful city of Saskatoon today. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, c'est un honneur pour moi, c'est un privilège pour moi de vous inviter, de vous accueillir ici à la ville de Saskatoon. C'est très belle pour le congrès annuel de la Commission internationale de l'irrigation et drainage. As we gather here today, we acknowledge we are on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. It is therefore a great honor for me to invite Elder Joe Guzanse, a former leader of the Saskatoon Tribal Council, a member of the Yellow Quill First Nation, and a very much respected elder to ICID this morning. Elder Joe recently received an honorary doctorate of law from the University of Saskatchewan. Please.
Thank you very much for all the many people there to make some of the things that we need to do for our people. From the world to us here, and some of the things that we're about to do and close by. So many ways, many days that you have done. I want to thank you for the many days that you're going to do and the many things you're about to do. I'm quite, for me, a good day for me to be many people, to hear some good things that are about to happen to you. Unfortunately for me in my young life, I had many little things in life that happened to me, and one of them was that I can't talk as much as I used to. So thank you. But I wanted to say thank you for some of the things that we're going to have in our life, in our way. I want to say thank you. I want to say also to God, for us, everybody, please have a good day and be with me in my life. Thank you so much. God for all the sin my own way. So please, with me, please why come up if you need to. Thank you.
very much, Elder Jill. Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished guests, our participants, the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage was established in 1950 as the leading technical, non-governmental organization dedicated to enhancing practices, policies, programs, and technologies in irrigation and drainage. ICID is a professional network of experts from around the world whose mission is to promote sustainable agricultural water management to achieve a water-secure world free of poverty and hunger through sustainable rural development. As a knowledge-sharing platform, ICID is dedicated to issues that cover the entire spectrum of water management practices, ranging from rain-fed agriculture to supplemental irrigation, land drainage, deficit irrigation, to full irrigation. Floods and droughts, the two extremes of an increasingly variable climate, now more than ever, form much of the focus of our activities. The backbone of ICID is its national committees, today numbering some 78 countries spread across Africa, the Americas, Asia, and Europe, covering over 95% of the irrigated area of the world. CANCID, Canada, the Canadian National Committee on Irrigation and Drainage, became a member of ICID in 1956 and has ever since actively contributed to the ICID mission through CANCID, the National Committee. And over the decades, Canada has played many a leadership role in ICID through the election of 2 Canadians as presidents of ICID and 7 Canadians being elected vice presidents, not to mention numerous others who have served as members and chairs of various ICID work bodies. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in this regard, we in the ICID and CANCID fraternities would be remiss if we did not pay tribute to the first Canadian president of ICID, Mr. Ali Shadi, formerly of the Canadian International Development Agency, and to Vice President Honoraire Mr. Harry Hill, former Director General of the Prairie Farm Rehabilitation Administration, headquartered here in Saskatchewan. They not only believed in ICID, but tirelessly contributed to its success, far above and beyond the normal call of duty in a voluntary capacity. Canada has had the distinction of hosting the 27th International Executive Council meeting in Banff in 1976, the 40th International Executive Council meeting in Ottawa in 1989, and the 18th International Congress on Irrigation and Drainage in Montreal in 2002. Now, today, CANCID once again, in its commitment to global water and food security, is organizing and hosting this week's 69th International Executive Council meeting, bringing together some 500 participants from around the world to deliberate on the theme of innovative and sustainable agri-water management, adapting to a variable and changing climate. CANCID is both grateful and honored to host this 69th IEC in the province of Saskatchewan and the very hospitable and warm city of Saskatoon. We're very fortunate heartland of the Canadian Prairies, where you will have ample opportunity to visit some of the very best that Canada has to offer in advanced agriculture and irrigation and water management. This week's program has been designed to provide a space for open discussion and dialogue through the many technical sessions and field tours. By interacting with the irrigators and crop producers, research institutes and universities, the private sector, and various federal and provincial government departments, you will observe firsthand what makes irrigation and drainage so successful in Canada. We, by no means, claim to have every problem solved. We still have much to accomplish in our vast country. And we want to also use this opportunity to learn from you and your collective wisdom. It is now a pleasure for me to introduce Canada's Minister of Public Safety Preparedness, the Honourable Ralph Goodale, who is the federal member of Parliament for Regina, Saskatchewan. Raised on a family farm near Wilcox, Saskatchewan, and educated at both the University of Regina and the University of Saskatchewan, Honourable Mr. Goodale has experience in business, agriculture, and law, as well as federal and provincial politics. He was first elected to the Parliament of Canada in 1974, representing the rural constituency of Assiniboia. In the 1980s, he served as the leader of the Provincial Liberal Party and was elected to the Saskatchewan Legislative Assembly in 1986. Mr. Goodale returned to the House of Commons in 1993 as the MP for Wascana and was subsequently re-elected to Parliament in 1997, 2000, 2004, 2006, 2008, 2011, and 2015. Congratulations, Minister Goodale. Mr. Goodale has served in the federal cabinet as Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Natural Resources, Leader of Government in the House of Commons, Minister of Public Works, and Minister of Finance. Between 2006 and 2015, he served as Opposition House Leader and Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. He became Minister of Public Safety in November 2015. Please welcome Honourable Minister Ralph.
Chandra, thank you very kindly for those generous remarks. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, mes chers amis. Let me begin by thanking Elder Cuivazons for the prayer to get us started in a good way this morning. Elder Cuivazons, thank you for being here. As we gather today on the territory of the Indigenous peoples of Treaty Number 6 and the homeland of the Métis, it is my great pleasure to bring you the greetings and good wishes of Prime Minister Trudeau and the Government of Canada. To all of you who have come from away, from around the world, welcome to Canada. Welcome to my home province of Saskatchewan, and welcome to this beautiful city of Saskatoon. Our thanks to the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage for bringing the meetings of this important global organization back to Canada once again, and specifically to Saskatoon for critical discussions over this next week about issues like climate change and the impacts upon water and agriculture and what we all need to do about those issues. Canada is steward to about 20% of the world's freshwater potential, and Saskatchewan boasts 42% of all of Canada's arable farmland. So we get it. Because of the importance of agriculture to Saskatchewan and Canada, And because of the importance of water to agriculture, many willing partners have come together to help sponsor this event. We collectively need to have the very best knowledge about water, and we need to motivate ourselves and others to make certain this very precious resource is as safe and secure and well utilized as it possibly can be. To that end, through my federal cabinet colleague Navdeep Bains, the minister responsible for Western economic diversification, the Government of Canada is pleased to contribute $15,000 to support this conference, the development of knowledge, and the dissemination of learning around the world. In Saskatchewan, we are very proud of our province and proud too of all of our idiosyncrasies. Of all Canadian provinces, if you've noticed on the map, Saskatchewan is the easiest to draw, but the hardest to spell. Our Saskatchewan geography is flat, but a little bit jumbled because the town of South End is in the north, and North Portal is in the south, and East End is in the west, and West Bend is in the east. Virtually alone in Canada, Saskatchewan stands stoutly every year against the scourge of daylight savings time. But we do produce the richest potash and uranium in the world, and we are inventive. People in Saskatchewan, girls in Saskatchewan, invented Girl Guide cookies. We also invented the automatic bank teller machine, and the cobalt bomb for treating cancer, and air seeding technology in agriculture, and the Cinderella crop of canola, and the concept of universal public Medicare. Our lives and our character have been shaped by the vast prairie landscape all around us. That means big horizons and ambitious goals, but also big risks. Our parents and our grandparents learned all about that in the 1930s, the dirty 30s, a decade of drought and depression when environmental disaster on the prairies extracted a very heavy toll. Those generations learned, and they always remembered, that no commodity, not oil or potash or uranium or grain, none of them is as precious as fresh, clean water. Out of the dirty 30s, two very good things emerged. One was a prairie-based federal government agency known as PFRA, the Prairie Farm Rehabilitation Administration, which thrived for 75 years as a world-leading center of knowledge, expertise, innovation, and practical hands-on action on soil and water conservation and development. When the city of Winnipeg had only a few days to prevent the Red and Assiniboine rivers from inundating that community, they called PFRA. When the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers had to manage the worst flooding in 300 years along the Mississippi, they called PFRA. When the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization needed a specific water development program in Northern Africa, Jacques Diouf called PFRA. It was, quite simply, the best on water. The other really good thing to come from the dirty 30s was the South Saskatchewan River Project. And yes, it was built by PFRA. It took 20 years of political argument and debate and planning, and then 10 years of construction. For a long while, Gardner Dam was the world's largest earth-filled structure. The lake it created, Lake Diefenbaker, is 140 miles long, 225 kilometers, with a shoreline running 500 miles, 800 kilometers. The project supplies safe, fresh water to 60% of Saskatchewan's population. It creates huge opportunities for parks and recreation. It supplies clean, green hydropower to the Saskatchewan grid. It provides the infrastructure for both flood-proofing and drought-proofing, a significant part of the prairies. And it introduced irrigation into Saskatchewan agriculture, leading to rural diversification and value-added growth. The project opened 51 years ago in Canada's centennial year in 1967. Fast forward now half a century to this present day. Sadly, we are making practical use of only a tiny fraction of the potential that is offered by the South Saskatchewan River Project. We have only just scratched the surface of what is doable. Sadly as well, the brilliance of PFRA was dismantled by myopic government decisions back in 2012. Ironically, because of climate change, we are probably facing more serious soil and water issues today than those that led to the creation of PFRA back in 1935. For the prairies, one of the prime manifestations of climate change is more frequent, more severe, and damaging storms, dumping a year's worth of precipitation in just a day or two, and then alternating with years of scorching drought. So the debilitating cycles of floods and droughts and droughts and floods are likely to intensify. We need the brain power to do the science, collect the data, analyze it correctly, and inform the public and decision makers at all levels. And that's what your International Commission is constantly doing around the world. And without our Canadian repository of wisdom and strength in PFRA, we are very fortunate to have people and institutions like John Pomeroy and the Global Water Institute at the University of Saskatchewan, and David Sachin and the Prairie Adaptation Research Collaborative at the University of Regina, and their colleagues in other academic institutions across the West. I also want to commend the work of the Canada-Saskatchewan Irrigation Diversification Centre at Outlook, the Saskatchewan Irrigation Projects Association, the Saskatchewan Association of Watersheds, Ducks Unlimited, private innovators like Clifton Engineering, the Saskatchewan Chamber of Commerce, and others who indeed get it and work hard at these issues all the time. We have, beyond doubt, the research and knowledge base to be well informed. I am more concerned about our ability sometimes to muster the political will, to shape a clear, bold vision of what we need to accomplish with water over the medium to long term. There are those who still don't believe much in climate change, or that human behavior has anything to do with it, or that our Canadian portion of the problem is big enough to prompt significant action here. And in government budget making, there is always huge pressure to fund projects that bring quick political gratification rather than building on longer-term objectives. But consider this. Under the Disaster Financial Assistance Arrangement, which the Government of Canada has with all of our provinces and territories, we have spent more, literally billions more, in the last 5 or 6 years cleaning up the wildfire and flooding consequences of climate change than we spent in the entire previous history of this program, stretching back to 1970. Going forward, the annual flood and fire losses, we are told by the Auditor General, will run in the order of $1 billion each year, unless we do something serious and important about dealing with climate change and dealing with water. So it's only smart to try to get ahead of this curve. And we can do that in part by investing upfront in water development and management infrastructure for both flood-proofing and drought-proofing, and for greater water-based economic and social growth in agriculture and beyond. And it needs to tie together both the major build projects on the scale of Gardner Dam landscape management initiatives to preserve and restore the natural wetlands that hold water and mitigate the flood risk. I'm very happy to say that in the Government of Canada's 12-year investment plan for infrastructure of all kinds across our country, we have earmarked more than $25 billion for green infrastructure. Some $5 billion of that has already been slated for community water and wastewater and public transit. Another $9 billion will be transferred to provinces and territories for their priorities. The federal government will administer a national fund of $2 billion, specifically for disaster mitigation and adaptation, to be distributed to major transformational infrastructure projects across the country on the basis of need and merit. In other words, we're looking for the best big infrastructure ideas to make provinces like Saskatchewan and industries like agriculture truly more resilient and less vulnerable to the consequences of climate change, while building economic and social growth. Water lies at the heart of this ambition, and I am hopeful that your deliberations will help scope out a vision that will be truly transformational for the future. And let that vision be nothing small. Thank you all for coming to Saskatchewan.
Thank you very much, Minister Goodale, for such an eloquent and distinctive talk. Very inspirational for our opening ceremony. We in Canada are indeed grateful to have ministers such as the Hon'ble Ralph Goodale to take leadership in water and agriculture in this country. It is now an honor for me to introduce the Honourable Dustin Duncan, Minister of Environment of Saskatchewan, Minister responsible for the Saskatchewan Water Security Institute. Minister Duncan is the member of the Legislative Assembly for Weyburn Big Muddy. He was first elected in MLA in June 2006, and he was re-elected in 2007, 2011, and 2016 provincial elections. In August 2017, Mr. Duncan was appointed Minister of the Environment and Minister responsible for the Saskatchewan Water Security Agency and also for Sask Power. Previously, he served as Minister of Energy and Resources, Minister of Health, and Minister responsible for Sask Energy. Ladies and gentlemen, please join with me in welcoming the Honourable Dustin Duncan.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Elder. Thank you very much for your opening prayer and for beginning our deliberations in a good way. On behalf of the Government of Saskatchewan and Premier Scott Moe, it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to Saskatoon, the world's foremost experts and researchers on irrigation and drainage. Just scanning your agenda today, it is amazing to see the diversity of countries represented in your presentations. India, Pakistan, Indonesia, Egypt, South Africa, Ukraine, Iran, Thailand, Hungary, the United States, and Canada among them. It will indeed take experts and solutions from across the globe to address some of the fundamental challenges that our world is facing today. From the 7.6 billion people living on the planet today, the world's population is estimated to grow to 8.6 billion people by 2030 and 9.8 billion in 2050. Feeding this new population will require answering several complex big picture questions, and in many different ways. That is exactly what you'll be considering during this conference. Questions like, how do we grow food more sustainably? How do we measurably and demonstrably deal with climate change? And how can we best protect our water resources and infrastructure for the long term irrigation and drainage are at the heart of these questions. And in coming to Saskatchewan, I believe that you've chosen a jurisdiction that has taken a thoughtful, forward-looking approach to integrated water management. We're the only province in Canada that has brought together its water management, regulation, and strategies under one organization, the Water Security Agency. That has helped Saskatchewan maintain its status as having one of the most rigorous regimes for ensuring safe drinking water supplies in this country. That same mentality of safeguarding water quality is also a big focus of the Water Security Agency's agricultural water management strategy to help prevent flooding as well as to protect habitat and downstream properties. All agricultural drainage projects in Saskatchewan must now be approved by the agency. We think this enlightened approach will help keep our agricultural sector sustainable, and that's absolutely essential to our economy. Today, Saskatchewan is home to more than 40% of Canada's cultivated farmland. Our province is a world leader in the supply of high-quality products to countries around the globe. We export agri-food products to 143 markets, and world demand for agri-food products is only growing. This means as a food supplier, we need to grow our production as well. Sustainable drainage projects will support our strategy to grow agricultural production, as will our long-standing commitment to irrigation projects. Historically, Saskatchewan has made significant investments in water management and in irrigation because it is recognized as a key path to sustainable, profitable production. At present, Saskatchewan has about 100,000 hectares of intensive irrigation. And while this is a relatively small share of our total farmland, there is considerable potential for growth. Saskatchewan is also home to a world-class irrigation research facility, the Canada-Saskatchewan Irrigation Diversification Center, or the CSIEC, located in Outlook. Our irrigation farmers and irrigation districts have been quick to adopt practices to become more efficient with water applications. And a wide range of crops are supported by irrigation, ranging from traditional grains and oilseeds to specialty crops such as potatoes, corn, and other vegetables and fruit. We'll continue supporting this sector through our programs and services, including production research, assessing land for suitability for irrigation, and good environmental stewardship. So when you're looking at some of those big picture questions that I referenced earlier, I hope that you feel that Saskatchewan is indeed committed and that our experts can also provide some insight to solving these questions. And I can assure you that we're all very interested in those answers. So once again, we thank you for your decision to stage this conference here in Saskatchewan. I join with the organizing committee in wishing you a great learning experience and an outstanding time while you're here in our province.
Thank you very much, Minister Duncan, for your support and for the support of the government of Saskatchewan in hosting this conference in Saskatchewan. It's now a pleasure for me to introduce the Mayor of Saskatoon, Mayor Charlie Clark, who was elected Mayor in October 2016. Previous to that, he was a City Councillor for 10 years. His professional background is in the areas of mediation, education, and community economic development. Mayor Clark has been part of nationwide conversations about the key role that cities play as engines of innovation and in ensuring a quality of life for all its citizens. He has presented many a paper nationally at conferences on affordable housing, urban development, policing, and community safety issues. Ladies and gentlemen, please join with me in welcoming Mayor Charlie Clark.
Thank you very much, Chandra, and I too want to very, very warmly welcome all of you who've traveled a great distance to come to Saskatoon, to come to Saskatchewan, to come to our country, Canada, for this very, very important conference, and I'm sure when some of you saw the name Saskatoon, that was the place where the ICID would be gathering. You had to look it up on a map and wonder, where is this place that we are going to? And because we're not as well known as Mexico City, which I know was I understand was the host city last year. What we hope to do in Saskatchewan and in Saskatoon is to exceed your expectations. Is that in arriving here from all over the world, that you come here and you meet the warmth of our community. You recognize that in Saskatoon, when we host the world, we take it very seriously. And we enjoy people coming here, and we have a small enough city that you can walk around, meet people, and enjoy all the things that we have to offer. And so it is a big deal for us to host a conference like this, and we appreciate you traveling such a long distance to get here. I also want to thank Elder Joe Cuisance for helping to open up our conference today. And as has been mentioned, we're on Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis. And as I've been learning about our treaty relationship and the relationship with the Indigenous people who have lived on these lands for thousands of years, the treaty relationship is about living in right relationship on this land. And in many ways, for the non-Indigenous community, for the mainstream society, this is a learning process of what does it mean to re-establish our relationship with the land. And in many ways, water is a fundamental part of that. And in this province, we've been learning and thinking a lot more about how we use water and how we work with water and how we work with the natural cycles of water as part of that process. And in fact, we've benefited from insights from elders like Joe Cuisance and others to think differently about working with the natural systems of water instead of always fighting and working against them. My own history, I grew up actually in British Columbia. I've moved across and around the province, or the country of Canada, before landing here. I met a girl from Saskatoon and settled down here. We're raising our 3 children in this city, and I've never looked back. And when I was young, I was in the Okanagan Valley. I saw in the conference there's going to be a presentation about grape growing in the Okanagan Valley. My grandfather grew fruits, apples, pears, peaches, and cherries in the Okanagan Valley. And some of my most fond memories are riding on the back of a motorcycle with him through the fruit trees and looking at the sprinklers and checking on the irrigation, because it's a very dry region, and the irrigation systems, which he had in many ways fashioned through his own with his own ingenuity, were fundamental to the success of that orchard. In moving to Saskatchewan, my wife's family is a farm family, dairy farming and grain farming in the area just to the north of here. And every conversation around the kitchen table starts with, how much has it rained? Is it 2 millimeters? Is it 2 inches? Water is absolutely fundamental to every waking moment, in the agricultural community. And this is why we have developed in our province very proudly such a strong tradition that has been outlined, I think, very well by Minister Goodale and Minister Duncan, of research and practice and learning about how do we make the best of our relationship with water, and to learn with irrigation and drainage how we can, as I said, make the best of the opportunities and challenges that water provides in this time. And now, as the municipal representative, as a city, we have been the economic base, the hub for much of the agricultural region that we live in, and also very proud hosts of the University of Saskatchewan, which is the place where we have the Global Water Security Institute, and where we have such a strong Department of Agriculture that does such important work with in developing new techniques and new systems for understanding how to grow more food, become better and better at being the breadbasket of the world, and bring front-of-mind research. And the work that's going on now as we face climate change and we face many of the things that I know are fundamental to your meetings. As I said, I'm a parent of 3 kids, and I wonder about their future. I wonder what kind of world we're going to give to them. And as the population of the planet grows, how are we going to make sure there's enough food and for the families and the kids growing up? And so this is truly important, the conversations that you're having. And we're very proud that we have such a strong base of researchers right here in Saskatchewan that are contributing and also will be benefiting from meeting with all of you from all over the world and bringing and sharing ideas across your disciplines and across your different universities so that we can learn how do we better make the most of our relationship with water, dealing with the floods and drought cycles that we talked about with regards to climate change. In our city, actually, I've been very much a part of a regional planning discussion as well. As the city grows and changes, and as we start to expand into some of the farmlands and some of the bedroom communities that are around Saskatoon, there's been a real shift just in the last few years for us about realizing that we used to just fill in every natural drainage area. We used to put neighborhoods on them. We fought against the natural systems of water in many ways, and we're paying the price in some cases where there's areas that are perennially flooding and where stormwater systems cannot handle the kind of rainfalls that we're seeing now, and there's repeat flooding happening in basements in people's houses, and it's a real challenge. We have an area called the Northeast Swale that was brought to our attention by some of the local advocacy groups here, and something that hopefully some of you will be able to learn a bit about, the Meewasin Valley Authority, which is a very proud, it's a governance body that looks after this stretch of the South Saskatchewan River and its valley that is in the city here. And they identified this Northeast Swale, which is on the northeast part of the city, as a natural drainage area that we should look at as a real asset. And as a result of that, in the last 5 years, it's now going to become a park and an area where people can learn about the native plants in the area and also the natural drainage systems. And instead of filling it in, putting houses, and then dealing with the fallout of that. So it's a real, I think, a learning process that we're in and underway to realize the power of water, the importance of water, and the need to work with it instead of work against it. And so I wish you very, very good deliberations, and I hope on behalf of my children and all of your children and grandchildren that you can help us figure out how we build a solid future that will be able to irrigate the crops that we will need and work with the water systems that we have into the future. And while you're here, I hope you enjoy our restaurants. I hope you enjoy our newly opened Agri-water art gallery, which has the largest collection of Picasso lino cuts anywhere in the world. And it was just opened last October. And to enjoy the beautiful Meewasin River Valley and the university and many of the different amenities that we have in our city. Because, as I said, we're very proud to host you here. And I want to close by thanking the local organizing committee and all of the organizing committee for all of the work that you've done to put on a great few days here. I wish you the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mayor, for that very warm welcome to your beautiful city of Saskatoon. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now a pleasure for me to introduce someone who is no stranger amongst you, President of ICID, Felix Reinders. Felix was previously the president of the South African Institute of Agricultural Engineers and the South African Irrigation Institute. He manages irrigation and drainage engineering at the Agricultural Research Council's Agricultural Engineering Department, where he plays a pivotal role in the coordination of irrigation engineering research, development, testing, design, and training. He has represented South Africa at numerous international conferences on irrigation and drainage. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of ICID, Felix Reinders.
Master of Ceremonies, Elder Joe, Excellencies, family of ICID, ladies and gentlemen, I believe you already feel extremely welcome in this excellent city of Saskatoon. As we are here together, here in Saskatoon, the heart of the Canadian Prairies, for the International Conference and the 69th IEC Meeting of ICID, I'm eagerly looking forward to the occasion, as we have a lot to discuss and deliberate upon what is taking place in our sector. I find it very timely that the main theme of the Canada event, innovative and sustainable agri-water management, adapting to a variable and changing climate, addresses the role of technology and new ideas in making agriculture resilient to a fast-changing climate when the demand for water is overstressed. The sub-themes of competing water demands, resilient agriculture, adapting agriculture to climate change, and irrigation and drainage in perspective will be addressed in 22 technical sessions, special sessions, workshops, side events. And if you look around you, this conference has brought together a diverse international audience with more than 500 delegates, including professionals, experts, researchers, policymakers, government officials, irrigators, and the private sector in the irrigation, drainage, water management, and agricultural fields. As you know, the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage has released last year its roadmap to ICID Vision 2030, with the main drive a water-secure world free of poverty and hunger, and in summary it states as follows: water as the main input for food production has played the most significant role in population growth and societal evolution over much of the recorded human history. Numerous civilizations flourished and then also became extinct because of the way they managed their agricultural water. By being a direct or indirect part of 7 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, water assumes an inclusively dimension both as a natural resource for rural development and an essential input commodity for industrial and human lifestyle consumption. Ironically, agricultural water seems to be a victim of its own success, as it supports the human life to multiply and enables better living conditions, only to be eventually challenged by increasing demand on its share of the available fresh water. The Minister already mentioned the growth in population came from more than 7 billion to 9.6 in 2050. Due to the increase in industrial prosperity over the last several decades and demographic changes taking place around the world, urban-oriented socioeconomic considerations have started attracting greater attention of policymakers and investors at the direct cost of rural water issues. Resolutions for development conflicts is feasible through exchange of knowledge and sharing of technology through communication, cooperation and collaboration. For more than 69 years of ICID network has symbolized the share and the exchange of knowledge and technology for agricultural water management. Under the limiting natural resources, climate change, and rising conflicts, the task of ICID network has become even more critical and daunting. The newly emerging and competing demands for water, coupled with the uncertainty of impact of climate change on food productivity, have challenged the ICID stakeholders and partners to redouble their efforts. ICID Vision 2030 for a water-secure world, free of poverty and hunger, through sustainable rural development, through its mission to facilitate prudent agriculture water management by encouraging interdisciplinary approaches to irrigation and drainage management, is an expression of intent of the network to help various stakeholders in moving towards a world we want. Canada had joined ICID in 1956, has hosted several occasions, and have been actively associated with ICID activities at national as well as international levels, and hosted, of course, the recent one, although 15 years ago, the 18th Congress and 53rd International Executive Council meeting in 2002 at Montreal. The ICID family is meeting again in the heart of the Canadian Prairies, which presents interesting developments in the field of agriculture, one of Saskatchewan's primary economic activities, surrounded by close to 25 million hectares of farmland in the province of Saskatchewan that supports sustainable agriculture through innovations. Managing water effectively is key to sustainable agriculture in Saskatchewan, for ensuring food and water security, and for creating a greater resiliency to greater climate variability. Saskatoon, a relative young city of arts, culture, and food, as the mayor have invited us to explore, provides an excellent venue for our annual meeting. You have only to scratch the surface to immerse yourself in centuries of deep cultural heritage, from First Nations traditions to the early days of settlement. Weaving through the city, witness to these important and historical changes is, of course, the beautiful South Saskatchewan River Valley. With the full support from the government of Saskatchewan, Cancer left no stone unturned to host a successful international conference at the 69th IEC to ensure learning and present hospitality at its best, leading to a memorable experience. On behalf of ICID, I extend a warm welcome to everyone, the ICID members and all the stakeholders all over the world, to this global event here in North America. I welcome you. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, pour vos commentaires très pertinents ce matin. As the President just mentioned, these conferences, International Executive Council meetings of ICID, could not be held without the support of the National Committee. In this case today, CANCID. Roger Hohm was the President of CANCID. He began his career with the government of Alberta in 1980 and worked on a variety of irrigation projects in support of irrigation district expansion, efficiency and productivity, and irrigation rehabilitation programming. In 2000, Roger took on the role of manager of the Alberta Government Farm Irrigation Management Branch and played a leadership role in the development of the Alberta Irrigation Development Centre. In 2008, Roger took on the the headship of the Alberta Irrigation Secretariat, with key functions that included the administration of the Irrigation Act of Alberta and providing technical and administrative support to the Alberta Irrigation Council. Ladies and gentlemen, please join with me in welcoming the President of Canada,
There we go. If I get this right. Welcome everybody to Canada. On behalf of the Canadian Committee on Irrigation and Drainage, we certainly appreciate each and every one of you coming to Canada to share with us knowledge and information over the next week that we're here. So, Canadian Committee, as Chandra mentioned earlier, is fairly new. We've been in existence since 1956, and we have had the opportunity and the privilege of hosting this executive committee meetings 3 times now. Canada is a broad country, from the western part, where it's really into our grain banks and our drier areas of the country, to the east coast, where drainage and micro-irrigation is extremely important to us. We have a very, very diverse climate, diverse region, and the Canadian Committee of Irrigation and Drainage is involved across Canada in looking at a number of different areas. When we look at irrigation in Canada, we are very, very new to irrigation. We're new to being a country. 1890s was when we first started our first big developments in Canada. We've gone through some very major expansions in the 1970s to 1990s, mainly due to development of aluminum pipe and PVC pipe. We can get the water to the crops and to the farms a lot easier. We've also, through that era, had some tremendous support from our federal and provincial governments, to the tune of $15 to $20 billion in water management and irrigation projects across Canada. And it's not all just government money that we look at. That money was really the incentive for research, for development, for our engineering companies across Canada to research and develop new technologies in water management and making sure that we can get water to the crops when we need it and how we need it. And also to develop drainage schemes to make sure that we can take care of circular drainage, both groundwater and surface water. Canada doesn't have a huge amount of irrigation. We're only about less than a million hectares. But because we're new, because we've had all these incentives, we feel that Canada is probably one of the leading countries in the world in technology in getting the water to the crops. And over the next 3 days, in many of the sessions that we're going to be holding, you'll hear Canadian speakers talking about some of the technology, some of the research, some of the developments that we have in Canada that we want to share with the rest of the world in making sure that we can get water to the crops. From a drainage side, we don't have monsoons or anything in Canada, but we do have extreme snowmelt and rainfall events. And we have to make sure that we can drain those soils so that we can get onto the crops or get the crops in early in the spring. So we've had a lot of research, a lot of development in drainage schemes in making sure that we can drain the soil sufficiently that we can get on early in the year. We've also had tremendous government incentives and support in these areas for research and development. We install thousands of kilometers of both surface and drainage every year in Canada. The committee, I think, has done an extremely good job of setting up this conference and coming up with both the theme of innovative and sustainable agricultural water management, adapting to a variable climate change. But the sub-themes, I think, are equally important with competing water demands, resilient irrigation, or agriculture, and irrigation and drainage perspective. Competing water demands is extremely important in Canada and around the world. In Canada, we certainly take into account our natural resources and our nature in Canada. So when we develop projects, making sure that we know what we're doing to nature and what we're doing to the natural environment is extremely important to us. We also have to make sure that we take a social responsibility. In Canada, probably 90% of our citizens live in an urban setting. They get their groceries from the grocery store. Where they get their food from is sometimes there isn't a connection to agriculture and to the on-farm. We have to have that social responsibility when we develop projects and we grow our food to ensure that that urban population understands where that is being grown and that it's being done in a responsible manner. Resilient agriculture and adopting agriculture to climate change. We understand that climate is changing. And it may not be specifically climate change, but it certainly is variable. And the dramatic changes from dry cycles to wet cycles seems to be growing every day. In Canada, we've taken that challenge on. And we're looking at any means possible to try and become a more efficient user of water. We've changed over time on the on-farm side from flood irrigation to now low-pressure pivot irrigation systems, and even drag tubes to increase our efficiencies so that we can take that water that we have available to us, spread it over as much cropland as we can to feed the populations of the world. Drip and micro irrigation research continues across Canada. Whether it's subsurface drip irrigation, whether it is drip irrigation for grapevines and fruit crops to others, we do a tremendous amount of research across Canada to make sure that we are as efficient as possible in learning how to get that water directly to the crops. The other thing when we talk about investment into the future, we've invested tremendously in Canada into taking irrigation canals and putting them into pipelines so we reduce seepage and evaporation to make it as efficient as possible to meet the demands of the crop when the crop needs it. We've developed irrigation canal lining techniques to be able to take some of our largest canals and line them to make sure that we can reduce the seepage that comes out of them. Our engineers and our research across Canada have developed innovative irrigation and water management structures that many of them we can actually run under very low energy conditions and remotely operate them so that we can make sure that we're meeting the demands and we can control the water when we need to. When we talk about irrigation and drainage in perspective, we understand that nutrient management is a very important part of drainage, whether it's surface drainage or subsurface drainage. And we're doing a lot of research across Canada, and we'll be speaking at a number of the sessions on how we manage some of that nutrients that come off of surface water that can actually affect some of the surface systems that we have. Flooding, runoff. Canada isn't alone in that. Across the world, flooding seems to be getting more and more, where we get these dramatic rainfall events. And we have engineers and research across Canada that are working strongly on developing better flood and runoff techniques to be able to manage that water better. During our post-conference tour, we're going to be stopping at one site that's close to my heart, that's near our town, where we're going to be taking our surface water, flood water, put it through wetlands, trying to clean the water up before it goes back into the natural environment. Drainage is very important in many part regions of Canada, and we will be talking about that in some of the sessions on designing better designs for subsurface drainage and making sure that we understand the soil profiles and being able to move the water from the subsurface and put it into better uses. Research, engineering, that's what Canada is about. As I mentioned earlier, we've had tremendous support from our federal and provincial governments in investing in our irrigation and our water management infrastructure. And in Canada, with some of our research, we're very fortunate. We have a company now that has developed a process of extruding 1,525 millimeter 60-inch PVC pipe. So now any of our canals that are under about 3.5 cubic meters per second can now be put into pipeline. Again, reducing seepage, eliminating evaporation, and again, making it so that it's almost like a city system where when you turn the tap on, the water's there. We have engineers who have developed a whole bunch of different irrigation water management structures and infrastructure. The drop leaf, low energy drop leaf gate was developed here in Canada, and it's been exported that technology around the world, where now using solar panels we can actually operate some very large water management infrastructure for check structures that can be automated and can be run under using solar panels. Prefabricated structures is always important. Trying to make sure that we get the best quality of water we can to our producers is also extremely important, and we're developing different types of filtration for our infrastructure. We're also very, very fortunate that we've had some very good support from our universities in research, whether it be McGill, University of Saskatchewan, University of Alberta, and many others in Canada that have focused on water management, irrigation, and drainage is very, very important. So, welcome to Canada. My last slide here, without these two gentlemen, I don't think this would have happened. These are our co-chairs, Mr. Rory Tolleson, Dr. Warren Helgeson. Can you two gentlemen please stand up just for just 1 second? They were the drivers of this whole process, and the Canadian Meeting really wants to thank both of you gentlemen for all of the hours you put into this, and let's make this a wonderful conference. Again, welcome to Canada. This conference is about sharing knowledge. It's about the world's best getting together on water management, irrigation, and drainage. Please enjoy yourself at the conference, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roger, for such an excellent overview of irrigation and drainage across Canada. I think those of you who have a chance to go on some of the conference tours and post-conference tours will see much of what Roger has presented here. So I certainly commend the various tours to you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our opening ceremony this morning. I want to thank all of you, delegates who've come from far and wide, have traveled long distances to be here with us. We in Canada are very pleased to welcome you and to host you this week. We wish you all a successful Executive Council meeting and various workshops and work bodies that you're participating in, and that your stay in Canada will be the most memorable one. With that, I would like to thank our distinguished platform party for their presence, for their wonderful remarks. I thank you all for your attention. I thank you, Elder Joel, for what you have done to open this conference and to bring us greetings from the people of Treaty 6. And I wish you success, and to invite you to have coffee outside. And Amin, who will be your session chair next, what time should we reconvene? At 11 o'clock, please, if you could just please come back to this room. We have 3 excellent international experts in irrigation and water management who will